So hey guys, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great.
I'm doing
Fantastic.
great. So to start, Theta, I have to ask, when we were in the pandemic, people were like, "Oh, there's gonna be so many movies about the pandemic and so many stories," and then we haven't had that many. I think people were kind of afraid of really getting into it. Did you
Yeah.
ever have a reservation of telling a story that is so both funny and reminiscent of the time where we all were like, "Put a mask on, wipe this off, wear your gloves," all that kind of stuff?
Any reservations I had about it came too late for me to do anything. I mean, by the time the movie had been greenlit, we were off to the races. We had really no choice. That's when it was set, and we just kind of kept our head down and went with it. The fact that it got greenlit at all is like very exciting because the reason we're not seeing anything set in that time is like because a film market has decided that there is no way to dramatize that in a viable way, that nobody wants to see it. And like they make their own reality in that respect. Like they diminish appetite by not creating anything in that area. We managed to get our movie greenlit because it's a pretty inexpensive movie, and we have a beautiful comic lead performance by John, and like and that's the long and short of it, you know. And I think we handled the material in an interesting way.
Yeah,
Also,
definitely.
you wrote this in a time, I mean, it wasn't the height of it, obviously, but like you did write this in a time we were still very much, inside. It wasn't like totally
Yeah,
down, but I think when you wrote it, when I read the script at least, it still felt like that was going to be our reality forever.
yeah,
We did not feel, and even when we were shooting it, we still felt kind of fresh out of something.
Mhm.
Um,
yes,
Yeah, and I was gonna say, John, I truly think you're one of the funniest people on this planet. Like, I think Wet Hot
agree.
American Summer is one of my favorite
Oh,
things ever. And I think of your scene when you're auditioning for Electricity very often. But when you're doing something like this that does have to have that more kind of grounded sense of humor, where if you're a person who's more inclined to pick humor in a terrifying situation, we're drawn to a character like this. How did you kind of navigate finding the balance between like the humor and the reality of like something that everyone is going to have connected to in some way, shape, or form?
Well, in this case, in the case of stress positions, in the case of Terry, and obviously too in the case of life, it's like I do think like uh, what is funny about Terry and his situation comes from a very dark psychological place, so it wasn't the case of like kind of adding two things together of like pratfalls plus
Mm-hmm.
kind of pathos. It was actually the things were intrinsically linked. Like his kind of repression is what creates this kind of manic archetype, comedic archetype. Uh, and it's like the kind of dark cultural moment that he's in, and is kind of like fighting. That makes him funny. It makes him fall on his face.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it's totally linked. You can't have one without the other, and if you do subtract one, you get something totally flat. Uh, I also just it's this is always what I grew up loving. I mean, there was a part of me that always loved like the high comedy, high silliness of like Stella and Wet Hot American Summer,
Yeah.
but I also was always very drawn to comedic performers who had a kind of haunting, sad quality to them. And yeah, and Theda and I have been friends for a very long time, and she really knows that about me. And I would say most of all, it mostly just came from the writing. It came from
Mm-hmm.
Theda knowing that I want to do that, and often don't get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Theta,
I
you.
think it. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead. I was just
Oh
gonna
no,
say
I
you
was just gonna say.
created a
Oh
Billy.
yeah, go go go.
That's you kind of created this Billy Crystal from the 80s and 90s character in that like you understand all of that pain he's going through, but it's still like funny. And I was gonna say, I was like, when you're writing something like that, but it's clearly for someone else, even though you're in the movie, how do you navigate, feeling like, oh, well, that's kind of good. Like what I want to say that, but like giving it to John to kind of really live in and create Terry for his own like mindset.
I know that John. I mean, like I know that John can deliver dialogue really, really well. The whole process of writing, though, was the more drafts I wrote, the less the character spoke. And John still delivers all of his dialogue consummately well, and as I keep saying in these interviews, came to set fully memorized, which was such a blessing. But I know that John's face is capable of expressing in a millisecond a whole succession of emotions and thoughts that are so visible, so transparently visible that like the I felt like that my job was to like let John's face do everything that it can, both in terms of being funny, but also that the pain behind the eyes, the real desperation that is totally sincere, for the character. And then I don't know, it's like you just set up the course at the beginning and then you let it run. So here the course is that this is a character who can't do anything.
Hmm.
And rather than go, that's just who I am. I'm not somebody who can do things. That's a character who goes, why can't I do a single thing? Why can't I not cook? Why can't I throw a party? Why don't I know how to go grocery shopping? I'm 33. And like, I want to kill myself because of that. So then that's just John's job is to just play that to the hilt as the most serious and desperate thing that you could possibly be going through.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, where the comedy and the pathos comes from, is just from John's commitment to the severity of that. And then the stakes are what they are. They're trivial.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, John, listen, I'm a Scorpio, so I loved every single
Me
time
too.
it was
Are you really?
every time we would.
Me? Yeah.
Oh, then that makes so much sense because every time it would be like a situation where Terry is like uncomfortable about how someone's reacting to something, I was like, yeah, that's how I would also react, which is not necessarily upfront, but very clearly not having whatever was going on in this situation. When you get to play those little moments where it's like, he's side eyeing his friend who came in and met his nephew, or he's doing something else, how do you kind of amp those up for yourself as a performer and make sure like it's still within the character, but you're having the most fun possible with that reaction?
Um, I mean, I love I think that people are in real life. I think actors often forget this that people in real life do actually let things show more than they know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think I'm often a lot of the things I love or a lot of things that I do gets criticized as like being like too like over the top or something.
Yeah.
This
And
is
like and I'm just like I'm like
despicable.
it's
This
insane.
is
I think everyone feels safer if something is like more like coded or mysterious or deadpan or just nothing
yeah.
affects. And like but I'm like, well, all the funniest people I know in real life, like the most unintentionally funny people I know in real life, are insanely expressive and are
Yeah.
like are
Yes.
very artificial and like they tell on themselves constantly. I think
Yeah.
we're all telling on ourselves. Like that's what's so funny about being a human being is like we have our idea of ourselves and then we have the ways that we're always just like revealing ourselves completely unintentionally and like and so yeah that was I don't know like how I necessarily approached that. I just think I loved that about this character in the script was like his kind of simultaneous like posturing and then
Mhm.
the ways in which he's like always like kind of kneecapping himself.
Yeah. Yeah. And at that, I was going to ask you, creating something, it feels like giving away your baby when you are also sort of in it. You're a best friend and you're directing and you're writing and you're playing all these parts at the same time. But like, how do you navigate acting on top of directing and making sure that all these moving parts are still the story you want to tell while making sure that you're, you know, honoring John's performance and Terry and everything in that regard?
I don't know. I felt like I was just a pain in the ass to everybody from beginning to end, and but we got through it anyway. Like in terms of navigating it, it was pretty fraught. It was a
Mhm.
lot to do. the blessing of it was that because there was so much that I had my hands on, I could always correct for the deficiencies in another stage by doing something to it at a later stage. So if I had written something stupid, I could direct it better, or if I had acted poorly, I could edit myself to seem like I was a little bit better of a performer and that kind of thing. I didn't experience it to be a burden
Mm.
at all. I didn't have anything else to do in my life, so I was happy to just do everything on this.
I love it. Thank you guys so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. I loved the movie and I can't wait for people to get to see it.
Thank you. Tell
Thank
your
you,
friends.
Rachel.
Thank you. Have a great one.